All right, I thought I'd leave you hanging with chapter 25. Here's chapter 26. The little boy was someplace strange, a field of some sort, and he was wearing a cap. Yes, a baseball field, that's what it was. There was a scoreboard that said 0-0, and he held a bat and squinted from under his cap, hoping to hit the pitched ball that came toward him. There were crowds watching. He hoped they would cheer, but he fell. Someone had pushed him from behind, and now his face was in the dirt. When he tried to get up, the person behind him held him there, so he became paralyzed. He couldn't move at all, and the man rubbed his face in the dirt, hard. There were pebbles in the dirt, sharp bits of rocks, and his face was bleeding. And the man kept laughing and laughing, and the boy couldn't understand why or what he had done to make this happen. The room was quiet now, for the beasts had gone, their work completed. Silently, littlest one uncurled herself, moved out from under the bed, and stood up on wobbly, tired legs. She could hear the boy moving restlessly, and she tried to flutter up, but her fluttering energy had not yet returned. She stood on tiptoes to watch him, and could see that his sleep was very troubled. He thrashed in the bed. There was nothing left, she thought, for her to do to help him, except to hope with all her being. She stood very still, closed her eyes, and clenched her tiny teeth, made her hands into little fists, and willed the dreams that she had given him to work their power. Then suddenly a woman began to sing. Her voice was one that had a smile in it, and she sang, "I went to the animal fair, the birds and the beasts were there," and made him laugh. They both laughed, he and the woman, and he was able to get up now because the man had disappeared. He reached for the bat, and the crowd cheered because he had overcome something terrible. It was better than a home run, the overcoming. He felt so strong. He turned to show the woman how strong he was, how proud of being strong. But now he could see that the man was there again. Now he was hitting the woman, hitting her in the face over and over and saying, "Stupid broad, stupid broad." And when he tried to run and help her, he couldn't move. He was very small suddenly and naked, and his mouth was full of something that tasted terrible. The man was shoving more and more of it into his mouth and ordered him, "Swallow, swallow." Laughter, Littlest thought, with all her being, as she stood resolutely on the braided rug beside the boy's bed. Courage! The big baboon, by the light of the moon, was combing his auburn hair. The woman had begun to sing again. How strong she was, he thought. She had escaped the man, and the song was funny. He began to laugh, and when he did, the thick dog food fell from his mouth to the ground, and there was Toby scarfing it down. How funny that was. The woman saw that and laughed with him, and the man was angry, but the laughter took his power away altogether. He was useless now, the man. He disappeared. The man was gone, and the woman sang, and they laughed and laughed, and sorry, guys. Ah, sticky pages. And then the boy picked up the bat and hit the ball, and the crowd cheered and cheered and cheered, and beside him, as he ran the bases, fluttering there by his shoulder, was a yellow butterfly. Littlest opened her eyes and looked. The boy was smiling now in his sleep. "I did it," she thought with a joy, and hoped that Thin Elderly would be proud of her. Thin Elderly? Where was he? She wanted to tell him about the boy. She wanted to hear about the woman, to know whether their hard work had been able to save the pair. Littlest rushed to the hall and looked around, but he was not in sight. Suddenly, just as she was beginning to panic, she remembered their agreement to meet him in the attic. They had been so rushed, so scared with the horde approaching, that they had made a plan in a hurried way, and she had almost forgotten. How worried he would be. She scampered down the hall, her energy beginning to return now, slid under the door, and ran up the dusty staircase, calling his name. He came to her from the corner where he had been huddled, wiping tears from his face, and took her into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you," he told her. "I'm safe. I hid," Little said, "and the boy is all right. I watched him while he had a nightmare, but then the dream pieces came to him and he smiled. The nightmare went away." Then Elderly smiled in relief. Littlest, he said, we do such important work. Sometimes we forget that. Let's go down now and check on the woman. Together they descended the attic stairs, tiptoed to the door of the pink-flowered bedroom, and peered inside. On his bed, the dog, Toby, snored lightly and moved his legs as if he were running in his sleep. I gave him a very quick fragment of a squirrel in park, just to keep him occupied, Thin Elderly explained in a low voice. A moan sounded from the bed. "Oh, dear," said Littlest, tearing it. They both watched as the woman tossed her head and whimpered. "She's caught in a nightmare," Thin Elderly murmured in distress. She stood helplessly watching as a tiny child crouched on the floor. "Eat it," a man was saying, and pushed the little boy's face into a bowl. In the background a woman wept, and she was weeping too, but both of them were powerless. "Eat it! Eat it!" the man kept snarling, but the child refused. He looked up at her and reached toward him. "Hold my hand," Littlest whispered. "Hold with all your heart, and think the words." She reached over and took Thin Elderly's hand, and together they wished dream strength into the woman. Peace, they thought, and family. And suddenly it was not that child at all, but her own self, her own little girl self, wrapped in a soft blanket with a woman, a mother, reading her a story. And outside it was snowing. Where was the tortured boy? She looked around, out into the snow, thinking he would be cold, but he was not there. He was here with her, wrapped beside her in a blanket. Then someone began to cry. Several people were crying. One was a young soldier who leaned toward her, but he was pulled away. And there was the sound of shots, and she could hear him weeping, but only for an instant, because she looked down then, and the little boy was there smiling, and he was the soldier, or perhaps the son of the soldier, or the memory of the soldier. He was alive and happy, and he held a stuffed donkey, and a dog was there too. The boy and the dog and the donkey were her family, and no one was crying any more, and the snarling man had gone away, and they were all together and safe. It was peaceful. Her breathing slowed and it became soft and regular. She smiled. Whatever had troubled her had ended. Thin Elderly and Littlest One relaxed. "She's fine," Thin Elderly said. "She's going to be fine." "We did it," Littlest said proudly. "Well," Thin Elderly replied, "we helped." He took her hand. "It's almost morning," he pointed out. "We must hurry back. The others will already be back in the heap." "Well, they didn't have to deal with a horde," Littlest pointed out importantly, "the way we did." Downstairs they slid under the door and out into the last of the night. Littlest looked around as they began their journey back. "Where's the horde now?" she asked. "Out there," Thin Elderly told her. "They are always out there." That's the end of chapter 26. More tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed. We're getting close to the end. And don't forget, you'll be taking a Who's Reading test on it after we're done.